I'm going to rebuild Manchester United over the next 10 seasons. Under Sir Alex Ferguson, they were the best team in the world. Now they're not even the best team in Manchester. So how do we get them back to the very top? Well, we need to win 15 trophies over the next 10 seasons. And we have to emulate Sir Alex Ferguson and win the treble. But we also need to get one of our 3 core players that we're rebuilding the team around to win the Ballon d'Or. Alejandro Garnacho, Rasmus Højlund and Kobbie Mainoo could all go on to become world superstars. So we're going to rebuild this Man United squad around these 3 players. However, this isn't all going to be plain sailing, as every single season we're going to have to spin the wheel that will modify our season in a positive or negative way. But before we do the spin for season 1, let me talk you through my initial plans. A 4-3-3 makes the most sense with the squad that we have. We'll build out from the back with some quick short passing. We'll then utilise Mainoo as our playmaker to create chances for Garnacho and Højlund to score goals. Absolutely foolproof. But before we can do anything, we have to spin the wheel. What's it gonna land on? Oh no, okay. That is very frustrating. I guess we go into the season with what we have, but it's not a great start for a rebuild, not being able to sign any players. We're kicking off with a huge test as we open the season away at Manchester City. Early on, City fired a warning shot as Haaland hit the post, although he did end up being offside. But we didn't take the warning seriously as Rodri headed City ahead 15 minutes into the game. But we fought back in the second half as Varane got on the end of a corner to put us back on level terms, only for Erling Haaland to then do Erling Haaland things and take back the lead for our rivals to win them the game. If I'm being honest, I think we all expected to lose that game, but it was a lot closer than I thought it would be. However, Rasmus Højlund scored a brace in a 4-0 win against Fulham, as well as hitting the back of the net against Luton Town. And Garnacho found his shooting boots as well as we thrashed Bournemouth 4-2 away from home to put us 3rd in the table 5 games into the season. But it was a kind start to the season and we now have the distraction of the Champions League where we should be topping our group. But this is Manchester United and of course anything is possible. Like finishing 3rd in the group and dropping into the Europa League. But obviously our aim is to win 15 trophies within 10 seasons and our players clearly think they have a better shot of winning a trophy in season 1 if it's the Europa League. After the Man City game, we only lost twice in the Premier League. Away to Nottingham Forest and against Everton, as they both fight back from points deductions. More impressively, we beat Newcastle United 3-0 and Chelsea 1-0 to put us 4th in the table just before Christmas. But that could all change by the end of January as we have some tough games coming up. However, we didn't fully capitulate against Arsenal, Liverpool and Man City, and then we went unbeaten in January to stay 4th in the table and make the League Cup final. But Arsenal are going to be incredibly difficult to beat. The Gunners had the better of the early chances, but luckily they couldn't find the back of the net. But early in the second half, we broke the deadlock as Rashford gave us the lead. And this gave us the confidence that we needed to push on and grab a second goal through Garnacho to put one hand on the trophy. But Arsenal were pushing hard. And eventually, backup keeper Bayindir, playing due to an injury for Onana, made a mistake and allowed Arsenal back in. But as we hit the 90th minute, we thought we'd done it, until Martinelli put a dagger in our hearts and equalised. So instead we're going to extra time, where in the 106th minute, we gave away a penalty. Which of course, Saka scored. We were moments away from actually winning the League Cup, and then we bottled it. This is devastating. Arsenal didn't just beat us in the League Cup though. They also beat us to 4th in the Premier League as we lost ground in the competition, but only because we've been fighting on multiple fronts. The FA Cup had gone incredibly well, and we've only gone and made the final of the competition playing against Burnley. But before we play the FA Cup final, we've also made the final of the Europa League by overcoming some quite difficult sides, meaning we're travelling to Dublin to take on Rangers. On paper, we should be winning this game. But of course, football isn't played on paper. It's played on the pitch of the Aviva Stadium, We're 12 minutes into the game, Bruno Fernandes slotted the ball under Jack Butland to give us the lead. But Butland did keep his team in the game with multiple big saves during the rest of the half, keeping Rangers in with a shout. But we were able to get the goal that we needed in the second half, as Alejandro Garnacho found Højlund, who found the back of the net. But remember, we were 2-0 up against Arsenal, and remember how that one turned out. So let's not get too confident. Especially when Rangers scored in the 80th minute, I really thought history was repeating itself. So this time I changed how we played to shut the game down and get to full time. Which worked. We just about beat Rangers to lift the Europa League title above our heads for trophy number 1 of the rebuild. Where I suppose no rebuilding has actually happened yet because we've not been allowed to make any signings yet. So can we make it a double with victory over Burnley? Well, we were in control of the game, but we just couldn't get our shots in the back of the net. That was until Bruno Fernandes finally stepped up, took charge and gave us the lead 22 minutes in. Early in the second half, Amad Diallo doubled our lead to put us even closer to lifting the FA Cup. And then he added another to his tally just before the hour mark to put the result beyond all doubt. We lift the FA Cup to end what's turned out to be a very successful first season. Rasmus and Alejandro had a superb season with 50 goals scored between them, and they are bright sparks for the future. Because of our transfer embargo last season, we now have 81 million to spend this season. But our fate, of course, is up to the wheel, which says, you've got to subscribe. I mean, if the wheel says so, you've kind of got to do it, right? But the actual wheel has thrown a curveball. We can only sign players aged 18 and under. I mean, if this was going to come up, it's better to have it now, early on in the video, so we can actually get some players to build for the long-term future. I even sold a bunch of players to make more money available to sign these youngsters. So in the end, we brought in 6 players for 101.5 million. Borza and Setford are more for the future and have gone out on loan, but Jorel Harto will come in to be a backup centre-back this season and learn from Varane. Esposito will play second fiddle to Rasmus Højlund, and Rooney Bargi will compete with Rashford on the right-hand side. Gabriel Moscardo, on the other hand, will be learning from fellow Brazilian Casemiro to be our future holding midfielder when he ends up leaving the club. But even if we start Rooney ahead of Rashford, that's only one change to our starting lineup from last season. Until the wheel lets us sign some actually good players, progress is going to be slow. But we need all our new young players to become best friends with Mainu, Garnacho and Højlund. So by season 10, they will have an insane amount of chemistry to be able to win everything. So over the summer, I've been inviting them over to my house so we can all bond together playing War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game that has ever been made, which is free to play on PC and console. Alejandro, I want you to form up on my left flank. Alejandro. No! Garnacho down! You can take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters and ships from 10 major nations. There's an incredible amount of detail in the game, with some of the best vehicle sound design I have ever heard in a video game. This is Tom to Rooney. I need to pretend that the enemy is Edison in goal. Leave no survivors. And after an entire summer of playing War Thunder, along with 70 million other players in huge PvP battles, we didn't just learn about the immense power of the Apache AH-64 attack helicopter, we also learned about the power of friendship and teamwork. That's going to propel us forward over the next 10 seasons. War Thunder is free to play on PC, PlayStation and Xbox right now. And if you use my link in the description or pinned comment, for limited time only, new and returning users who haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack which includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. I've been to hell and back with those boys. We are brothers in arms now, and we need to prove it on the pitch. Garnacho helped us to a 3-0 win over Fulham on the opening day of the season, whilst Rasmus Højlund got underway with a brace against Crystal Palace in a 4-1 win. And even Kobbie Mainoo was starting to chip in with a few goals, whilst our new boy Rooney Bargi got his first in a narrow 2-1 win over Brighton. So our Wonder Kids have got us 19 points from an available 30 to sit 5th in the Premier League table, as somehow Everton lead the way. However, the next couple of months weren't great. Arsenal tore us limb from limb in a 4-0 defeat. Spurs then beat us 1-0 away from home, and newly promoted Leicester scored in the 96th minute to beat us 4-3 at the King Power Stadium. So as we hit the halfway mark of the season, we drop down to 6th place, and we're 6 points away from the Champions League spots. Speaking of which, we're in the Champions League this season thanks to our Europa League success. But this year, the format has changed, and we've won 5 out of our 8 games. But that was enough for us to finish 8th in the league phase table and get a bye straight through to the round of 16. But as we prepare for that, we had an upturn in form. Jadon Sancho scored late on to earn us victory against our City rivals, whilst Rooney Bargy scored twice in a 4-0 win over Brentford. But our top scorer was Marcus Rashford, who rescued a late draw in the 90th minute at St James's Park and scored in a 6-1 win over Aston Villa. This saw us climb up to 3rd in the Premier League and perhaps edge us towards a 4-way title fight as we chase down Arsenal, who were also about to face off against in the Champions League. But the Gunners had too much ammunition in the first leg, scoring twice to come away with a 2-0 win, and a goalless draw in the second leg means we're out of the competition. So now we can just focus on the league, where Sancho scored twice in a monumental 4-0 victory to get revenge over Arsenal and close the gap at the top. But a late loss to Chelsea away from home, and ironically a 96th minute equaliser for Spurs on the final day of the season, handed Arsenal the Premier League title 3 points ahead of us. This season wasn't quite as productive for our 3 key players of the rebuild, but Kobbie Mainoo did make a big jump this season, which is good to see. The board are only giving us £63 million to spend this summer though. But of course, we are being left to the mercy of the wheel, which says we have to sell our best player to Man City. I mean, it's not fun, but at least we're going to have more transfer budgets. According to our coaches, our best player is Bruno Fernandes. Yes, he was our top scorer last season, but at 30 years old, we were going to have to sell him anyway. And given he's worth £80 million, that'll do very nicely for our transfer budget. And I have a perfect plan for the money. Florian Wirtz wants out of Bayer Leverkusen, and he would fit into our system amazingly. So finally in season 3, we're able to sign a genuine star and get Wirtz into our midfield. Right back is an issue, so we spent £43.5 million on Tomiyasu from PSG. So now the starting 11 is taking shape. Rasmus Højlund scored 4 goals against Liverpool in a 7-0 opening day win. Florian Wirtz then got his first goal for the club in a 2-0 win away at Brentford, and even Gerald Harto, who is starting for us this season, got in amongst the goals. However, we did eventually lose, and annoyingly, it was to our City rivals 1-0. But aside from that blip, we just kept winning right up into the new year, which means exactly halfway through the season, we have a 7-point lead over Spurs at the top of the table, but the Champions League wasn't quite as straightforward. Liverpool scored in the 91st minute to beat us 2-1 away from home, and we got dominated by Feyenoord in the Netherlands. But we won our other 6 games pretty convincingly to end up 4th in the league phase and go straight through to the round of 16. But after beating Valencia on penalties and scraping past Napoli, we got battered by PSG in the semi-finals. So we're out of the Champions League, and our New Year Premier League form had dipped. And in a league of such tight margins, we now drop behind Spurs. This means we need to win, and Spurs have to lose on the final day of the season to see us lift the title. But before the game really got started, it already looked over, as Spurs raced into a 2-goal lead. But we got very lucky just before half-time when Rashford won a penalty and scored it. We're doing exactly what we need to do, we just need to hope for an Everton comeback. But as we continue to look ineffective in front of goal, Spurs scored again to dampen the mood, and we were resigned to the fact that this wasn't going to be our season. But I am really happy that we have 3 players scoring at least 20 goals a season. That is something that we can build on. Well, it might be if we had more than 32 million to spend. But we might be able to do some business with this, as the wheel says we can only sign players over 30 years old. And typically, they're a little bit cheaper than younger players. We ended up selling Raphael Varane to raise a bit more spending money, which allowed us to replace him with Aymeric Laporte on a free transfer, spend £38.5 million on Andreas Christensen, and finally we spent £17.5 million on Ruben Loftus-Cheek. We opened up the season with a 5-0 demolition job against Arsenal. But we did end up drawing with Manchester City and losing 2-1 away to Aston Villa. So this leaves us trailing Tottenham Hotspur by 3 points after 11 games. But things were looking up when we beat Man City 5-1 at home. Not just because they're our closest rivals, but they're also in the running for the title. But we did struggle against our other title rivals, losing at home against Chelsea, and crucially being unable to beat Spurs as we drew with them at Old Trafford. But they haven't had it all their way either. So we're now 2 points behind them, meaning it's Arsenal who now pose a threat with their 2 games in hand. And they became an even bigger threat after they beat us 2-1 away from home in the league, and then in the semi-finals of the League Cup. But we are going to remain focused on the Premier League, where we beat Leeds United and Bournemouth with some pretty late goals to secure all 3 points in those games. But for every step forward, we have a step backwards, as we also lost to Newcastle, which means we fall to 3rd place and 4 points behind Spurs. But if we can beat them next, we close the gap to just a single point. And luckily for us, Alejandro Garnacho's 2nd-minute goal was the only one of the game, which secured us all 3 points. So now we really have a huge title race on our hands. We beat Crystal Palace 3-0 at home, and then battered West Ham United 4-0 to collect 6 points. In the meantime, Spurs lost both of their Premier League games, which means we go top of the table by a single point. And then because we beat Chelsea 3-0 away on the penultimate day of the season, as long as we beat Liverpool on the final day, we will lift the title. Florian Wirtz got us off to a perfect start with a superb goal in off the post 6 minutes into the game. We looked in control of the game, as Rasmus Højlund doubled our lead as we head into the break. But the title was wrapped up just over an hour into the game when Garnacho made it 3 from a low cross, which means at the full-time whistle, we win Manchester United's first Premier League title since Sir Alex Ferguson. And we also have the chance to win some more silverware this season. Although not in the Champions League, as Liverpool had seen to it that we wouldn't win that. We'd reach another FA Cup final, and this time we're taking on Manchester City. And just like against Liverpool, we opened up the scoring early as we broke forward on the counter-attack with Rashford scoring. And 60 seconds later, he doubled our lead with a terrific headed effort. But just over an hour into the game, Man City got themselves back in it, as Vinny Jr. gave our rivals a lifeline. But luckily for us, they didn't have another chance, meaning we lift the FA Cup for a domestic double and the 4th trophy of the rebuild. But we do need to win another 11 and get the treble in the process. Once again, goals are coming from all over the pitch, so going forwards, we have some great players. But I think we do need to improve our ageing back line. So what is the wheel going to give us this season? Only sign free agents. I feel like we need to have a few nicer options on the wheel. I feel like we've not been done any favours really. Although we've only been given 20 million to spend this season because we're £263 million in debt. So actually, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. And we were able to find some quality, with Pervis Estupiñán, Amar Dedic and Jean-Claude Todibo all adding some quality to our back line. We also picked up a couple of youngsters from Man City and Chelsea, where we did have to pay some compensation. But I'm also trying to get us out of debt. And when Al Ittihad made a £100 million bid for Rashford, we had to accept it. So out he goes along with Laporte, which hopefully means we're going to have more money to spend next summer. And as a result of our transfers, this actually means the upcoming season starting 11 has a lot of changes to it. Kobbie Mainoo scored the winner in a 3-2 victory against Manchester City. Estupiñán scored his first goal for the club as we tore apart Arsenal at the Emirates. And Liverpool didn't stand a chance as we overcame our traditional rivals 3-1. But we did suffer a few losses. 1-0 at home against Chelsea and 3-0 away at Newcastle does suggest we aren't totally unstoppable, but we have a 6-point lead just over the halfway mark of the season. And fortunately for us, we just kept winning games. We didn't actually keep many clean sheets, so we might need to think about replacing Onana next season, but when we consistently score 3 or 4 goals a game, it doesn't really matter. So with 5 games to go, we're cruising towards back-to-back league titles. As for the Champions League, we went unbeaten during the league phase to finish 3rd in the league table behind PSG and an impressive Benfica side. But in the round of 16, we thought a different Portuguese side was about to knock us out, as Porto won 1-0 in the first leg. But we bounced back and won 4-1 in the second leg to make sure we progress. But once again, we thought it could be the end of the line as we drew 0-0 at home with Real Madrid. So it really surprised me when Hannibal gave us the lead in Madrid, only for the Galacticos to equalise moments later. But an hour into the game, Diogo Dalot was the unlikely man to head us in front from a corner and win us the match, meaning we move on to the semi-finals. In Paris, we took the lead through a Marquinhos own goal, but held strong defensively to make sure PSG only scored 1. And in the second leg, neither side could break the deadlock. And it seemed like we were going to penalties, until the former PSG man, Gabriel Moscardo, scored in the 119th minute to win the game 1-0 and send us to the Champions League final. Before we get there though, we have to win the Premier League. Remember how we had an 8-point gap with 5 games to go? Well, it's a good job we had that gap, because we drew 4 of those final games to just lift a second title in a row by 2 points ahead of Tottenham, who we face in the Champions League final. Early in the game, after some nice build-up play, Sancho found Florian Wirtz, who was onside, and gave us the lead as we head in for the half-time break. And things only got worse for Spurs when 2 minutes into the second half, Dejan Kulusevski brought down our man in the area and the referee pointed to the spot, and Garnacho was happy to oblige and give us a 2-goal lead. But this meant Kulusevski had a point to prove, and we defended terribly as somehow we kept allowing Spurs forwards, and eventually Kulusevski punished us with a goal. Moments later, Son almost got Tottenham back on level terms with us, but Onana made a very good save. However, from the resulting corner, we managed to clear the ball up to Estupinian, who raced up to the other end of the pitch, put in an incredible cross to Garnacho, who managed to score to restore our 2-goal lead. And after that, I was taking no chances, so we shut the game down, and we've done it. We've won ourselves the Champions League in Season 5, along with our 2nd Premier League. But one of the challenges was to win the treble. So can we do that this season? No. We actually lost in the 4th round of the FA Cup to Tottenham. So no treble this season, and we're nowhere near seeing any of our players win the Ballon d'Or yet, so we've still got some way to go to meet all our challenges. But because we sold Rashford and Laporte for big money last summer, and we didn't spend a penny, the board are giving me $155 million to spend this summer. I just hope the wheel is very kind to us. Okay, I mean, that might be alright. I kinda hope the bids come in for some really rubbish youth players that we just don't care about. But obviously, they weren't. Newcastle made the first bid of summer. They want backup fullback Amar Dedic for £34.5 million up front, 12 down the line, and 17.25 after 20 games played. Actually, that is a pretty decent deal for us. And then Everton have also made a bid of £30.5 million for Christensen, which actually saves me a headache of what we need to do with him. I'm just pleased that we didn't lose Florian Wirtz. That would have been a disaster. As a result, I spent big on 4 players to massively improve the team. So with Restes and Mosquera in the back line, I think we look stronger than we did last season. The season started well for us, as Esposito scored the winner off the bench against Everton. Garnacho, Rooney and Wirtz all scored in a dominating 3-1 win against Brighton, but then we suffered a surprise 3-0 loss away to West Ham United before Burnley battered us 3-1 at Turf Moor. So a third of the way through the season, we're in 5th place and 7 points behind Chelsea. But we just couldn't sort out our form. We couldn't string together more than 3 wins in a row without a setback, which means we then fall 12 points behind Chelsea 2/3 of the way through the season. We've also been knocked out of the League Cup and the FA Cup, so our only real hope of a trophy is the Champions League. But the league phase wasn't great as we drew with AC Milan and lost to Celtic and Bayern Munich. But out of nowhere, we were able to beat Real Madrid 2-0 at home in the round of 16. It's just a shame that we also lost 4-1 in the other leg to get knocked out. So we have no hope of a trophy this season, as we finish 4 points behind Chelsea, second in the table. The issue seemed to be a lack of goals, so perhaps we need to address that over summer. Of course, if the wheel allows it. Incredibly, we've been given £161 million to spend. Please land on double the money. Please land on double the money. Please land on double the money. Okay, well, this is certainly going to be interesting. We now have to spin the second wheel and only sign players from the league it lands on. And the winner is the Premier League. Okay, it's a little bit annoying as it's the most expensive league, but I guess it's all right. So we paid an extortionate £97 million for Carlos Baleba from Brighton to start ahead of Moscardo in the defensive midfield, and for £73 million we signed Chris Bennett from Leicester City to compete with Mosquera at right centre-back. Plus we kind of have a new signing in Austin Sanusi, who we developed from our own academy. He's had 3 loan spells to develop, and I think he is now ready to replace the outgoing Estupinian. Baleba announced himself by scoring our first goal of the season in a 3-0 win against Arsenal. But his former club got revenge on us by beating us 2-0 at the Amex. Aside from the odd blip, we were winning games and looked like a much better unit than last season, especially when we beat title rivals like Newcastle 5-1. But after 13 games, just 5 points separate first from 7th, so it's going to be an incredibly tight season. We did manage to navigate a tricky run of fixtures around the turn of the year, beating Spurs, Liverpool, and sharing points with Chelsea and Man City, but we did lose to Arsenal. Luckily, we followed up with some good wins against teams below us in the table, which means we're now forming a breakaway top 3 with Newcastle and Man City. But you'll also notice we beat Leicester in the League Cup semi-final, meaning we now have to play the final. We are way behind our target of 15 major trophies won, so we need to make sure we can beat Sunderland here to win number 7. It took 30 minutes for our first real chance of the game, but we just couldn't direct the ball goalwards. But just before half-time, we have the chance to take the lead as the referee gives us a dubious penalty against our former player Ethan Laird. However, Garnacho's spot kick was saved, meaning we go into half-time 0-0. And in the second half, we just did not look like scoring. But in the 89th minute, Rooney had a free kick, which was incredibly well saved. So here we are thinking we're going to have to go to extra time, until the 95th minute when Baleba found Mainu, who drove towards goal, hit the ball as hard as he could, and got us the goal we needed to win the match and lift our 7th trophy of the video and first League Cup. It also spurred us on in the Premier League, winning 6 of our next 7 games, putting us on top of the table with 5 games to go. But these next 5 games are incredibly tough. Now we started off nice and easy with Leicester, as Garnacho scored the first of our 3 goals in a 3-0 win. But more impressively, we beat Spurs 4-0 at home to put one hand on the trophy. Chelsea were then relatively easy to beat, as we won 2-0 at Old Trafford, which means if we beat Man City, we can win the title with a game to spare. So when Garnacho opened up the scoring 7 minutes in, we felt pretty good. But we felt even better when he doubled our lead 20 minutes later. City did fight back and scored a goal late on, but it was too little too late, and we lift the title in the Etihad Stadium. We can also make it a domestic treble, as we've had a very kind run through the FA Cup and have made the final where we take on Burnley. Well, when I tell you it was a bloodbath, I really mean it. We showed no mercy as we tore Burnley limb from limb and left them crying for their mothers in the corner of a room as we put 7 goals past them. Incredibly, Burnley were able to score 2 past us, but when we have the attacking talent to score 7 goals, I really don't mind. We lift the FA Cup for a domestic treble, but the actual treble that we want is the FA Cup, the Premier League, and the Champions League. After finishing joint top of the league phase with Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, we went through to the round of 16. Here we beat Arsenal 1-0, Real Madrid 5-2 in the quarter-finals, and Porto 2-1 in the semis to make it to the final, where we're taking on PSG. Win this and we'll complete our treble challenge, but we'll also be the first English team to ever win a quadruple. The first highlight came 30 minutes in when Rooney lost the ball to Matthias Tell in the midfield, allowing PSG to come forward and shoot, but we blocked the shot. So after a cagey and boring first half, the scores remain 0-0. But there seemed to be some confusion in PSG's defence from our throw-in, as the ball fell to Højlund's feet and he gave us the lead 55 minutes in. But PSG weren't going to lie down. They kept possession well and were able to pass through our lines before finding our former player Antony, who scored. So it means we're going to have to go to extra time, where we had the better upper chances, and 100 minutes in, we were piling the pressure onto PSG, but Donnarumma made a great save from Sancho's effort. So with 20 seconds left in the game, I subbed off our centre-backs for better penalty takers, meaning Esposito's first action is going to have to be to score a penalty, and luckily, he made it count. Mbappe was up next and he just scored, but Garnacho wasn't so lucky, as his effort was saved. But luckily, Restes also saved Matthias Tell's effort. Mount then buried his shot, but so did Theo Hernandez. Florian Wirtz scored a Panenka, whereas Antony went for power. So Rasmus Højlund had to score, and he did, which means if PSG failed to score now, we win. The pressure was piling on Rodrigo's shoulders, but he handled it well and scored. So now we're at sudden death, and Hannibal, who we just brought on, has to score, but he didn't. So if Kimpembe scores, PSG win. But Restes made an incredible save. This then allowed Sancho to score, piling the pressure back onto PSG and Thiago Santos. Restes made the save, and we win the shootout, winning the Champions League, completing the treble challenge to emulate Sir Alex Ferguson, and even becoming the first quadruple winning Premier League side. Not a bad season at all. So now we have 3 more seasons to win 5 more trophies and get one of Højlund, Garnacho or Mainu to win the Ballon d'Or. So far, none of them have made the top 3, but I think with their goal contributions this season, along with everything they've won, they've got to be in with a shot. We have 190 million to spend in Season 8, which is ridiculous. But it could all change with the wheel. Okay, English players it is, that's alright. The only area I want to improve on is right back right now, and I have the perfect player in mind. So we sold Tomiyasu to Al Nassr, and then spent £133 million on Tino Livramento from Newcastle, but I think he looks worth it. However, as Brighton did last season when we signed Baleba for big money, Newcastle managed to overcome us at Old Trafford, winning 3-2. But despite that setback, both Rasmus Højlund and Alejandro Garnacho were in superb scoring form, as they both tried to make a case for becoming the Ballon d'Or winner in 2030. They're both racking up goals as we sit 3rd in the Premier League table a third of the way into the season. In early December, they're both in double figures for goals, but the lack of assists might let them down. And in the end, it was Erling Haaland who won the award, followed up by Jude Bellingham and Matthias Tell. I am starting to get really concerned that we aren't going to see a Ballon d'Or winner at Manchester United. But we do have a surprise package that is making a case for it. Francesco Esposito has been very patient since we signed him in Season 2, playing backup to Højlund. But in the second half of the season, everything he touched turned to gold, and it was starting to get weird when he wasn't scoring goals for us. So by the end of the season, he was actually the 2nd top scorer in the Premier League, and is the main reason we've won our 4th Premier League title. We also won the FA Cup thanks to Rasmus Højlund, who scored the only goal of the game against Derby County. But in just 8 starts and 37 substitute appearances, Esposito was our top scorer this season, and I think we have to start him next time out. Sadly, he couldn't win us another Champions League though, as we got knocked out by Napoli in the semi-finals. So heading into Season 9, we've been given a ridiculous £217 million to spend. At this point, I really don't know what to do with the money. But the wheel might just take it all away from us, or give us a reason to spend the money, because we have to release all players aged 30 and over. Luckily, that's just Mason Mount, Jean-Claude Todibo and Jadon Sancho, who we can replace, but they have been really important players for us. Mount is replaced by Adam Wharton for 59 million from Crystal Palace. For 48 million, we replaced Todibo with Charlie Sayers-Newton from Everton. And then we splurged 69 million pounds on Joao Rigo from Bayern Munich to replace Sancho. But it's Esposito who is going to be leading the line now, as I think he's our best hope of winning the Ballon d'Or. And now he's starting, he was even better than he was last season, scoring goals pretty much every game and helping us to win 11 out of our first 13 games of the season. His 17 league goals is already as many as he scored last season in the league, but somehow he's not in the top 3 for the Ballon d'Or. So we now only have one more chance to get one of our players to win it. Being snubbed only seemed to spur on Esposito, as he carried on his reign of terror over the Premier League, reducing every goalkeeper to a quivering shell of a man, as out of nowhere, our backup striker was now somehow the best footballer on the planet. And his 30 goals so far this season is more than Rasmus's best ever total, and we're only 26 games into the season. Now, I'm fully aware this is turning into the Francesco Esposito show, but I am just astounded at how good this guy's turned out to be, because all the goals he's ended up scoring have won us a 3rd Premier League title in a row, a point ahead of Arsenal, as Esposito bags himself 40. However, I am concerned that we're turning into a well-rounded team of superstars into a team with just one major figurehead. Because although we won the Premier League, we lost in the League Cup final, the semi-finals of the FA Cup, and in the semi-finals of the Champions League. And maybe I'm being a bit harsh here, but our goal is to win everything and claim 15 trophies, and right now, we're not really on track for that. So heading into season 10, we need to win 2 competitions to meet the target. But with 60 goals in all competitions, if Esposito can do that again, and everyone else steps up their game to match him, I think we should be able to do it. However, our budget has been reduced to just £200 million. I really have no idea how we're going to cope. We still have double the budget on the wheel though, but instead, okay, well, I guess it's the final season, it's not actually that bad. We can only spend money that we make from player sales. The issue is, there's no one I actually want to sell because I'm pretty happy with the team. So this summer, I just think we're going to end up doing nothing. To start the season off, we were winning plenty of games, as the other players were stepping up to the plate. But obviously, it was still Esposito scoring the goals and leading the charts. So surely a man who got 40 Premier League goals last season, and is currently on 15 from 14 games played this season, putting us second in the table, is a shoo-in for the award. Well, apparently not, as Matthias Tell wins it, Xavi Simons comes in second place, and out of nowhere, Alejandro Garnacho comes in third. Yes, he is very, very good, but I'm surprised he's been put for this award above Esposito. But of course, this does mean we've actually failed this part of the challenge. No one's won a Ballon d'Or. I mean, I should have thought of some punishments, but I didn't, so there. Now we really need to win 2 more trophies to make sure we complete at least 2 of our challenges. Luckily, we've managed to beat Southampton, Arsenal and Crystal Palace on our way to the League Cup final, where we take on Everton. The Toffees had the first chance of the game, advancing down the far side of the pitch as they got a low cross into the middle that we just stopped from going in the back of the net. At the other end of the pitch, we were playing some great quick passing football, eventually working the ball to Garnacho, who showed us why he came third in the Ballon d'Or with a superb finish. Moments later, Rooney Bargi had a chance, but his effort skimmed over the top of the crossbar, so Esposito wanted to show him how it was done. But somehow his effort was parried wide. So heading into the break, we're only 1-0 up. And with us missing all of these golden opportunities, obviously only one thing is coming. That's right, an Everton goal to level the scores late on to take us to extra time, where we scored less than 3 minutes into the first half. If only we could have done that at some point in the previous 90. So now we just need to hold on to win trophy number 14. But of course, Everton fought back with a goal from Wilfred Gnonto. So now we have to rely on penalties. Both teams' takers were confident and in form, as both us and Everton scored our first 4 penalties. But as Vega stepped up for Everton's 5th, he hit the post. This means if Joao Rigo scores, we win. But he couldn't. So as we head into sudden death, despite the pressure, the players kept delivering until we got to the 11th round of penalties where it's keeper versus keeper, and they both end up scoring. So it's back to the start. And this time, Restes makes the save. So it's all up to Florian Wirtz, who scores, winning us the League Cup and our 14th trophy of the rebuild. We're still in the FA Cup, Champions League, and we're currently top of the Premier League, so we have a very good shot of doing it. However, we then lost to Bayern Munich in the Champions League round of 16, and we also lost to Swansea City in the FA Cup 5th round. So now we only have the Premier League to win to complete the challenge. Luckily, we have a kind run of fixtures towards the end of the season. So Livramento scored to help us beat Brentford, Mosquera headed home a corner as we thrashed Bristol City 4-0, and Esposito scored the only goal of the game in an important 1-0 win against Southampton. Important because it keeps us 1 point ahead of Man City with 4 games to play. So as we beat Everton 3-0 at Old Trafford, and then continued winning thanks to a 90th minute Rasmus Højlund goal to beat Arsenal 3-2 at the Emirates, Man City lost away at Liverpool. So now we have a 4-point gap. If we can beat Everton in our next game, we win the title and the all-important 15th trophy. The boys knew what they had to do and we piled on the pressure from the first minute. Eventually though, we made a breakthrough down the far side of the pitch, putting a low cross into the middle, and of course, Esposito turned it in to give us the all-important lead. Then, just before half-time, a defensive error gave the ball to Garnacho, and we quickly pounced on the confusion and doubled our lead heading into half-time. As a result, Fulham then fell apart as very quickly into the second half, we grabbed our 3rd goal. And just before the end of the game, Tino Livramento got in on the action as well, securing the win and our 15th trophy of the video right at the very end of our 10-season limit. So I think we can say we have successfully rebuilt Manchester United, even if we didn't get someone to win the Ballon d'Or. I am still really annoyed about that, justice for Esposito. But this is the incredible team that we've built across the past 10 seasons, and if it was an actual real-life team, I reckon it would win a few Premier League titles. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget you can play for free on PC, Xbox and PlayStation, but make sure you use my link in the pinned comment or description to get the massive bonus pack to give you a huge advantage. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and let's keep the binge going, shall we? Because in this video on screen, I cannot go to sleep until I beat Football Manager Mobile. My god, it was a slog. I do not want to stay up that long again for a long time.